Good. So good morning, everybody, and for those in Europe, good afternoon. I hope each one of you are fine and taking care of yourself and everybody else. So in the seminar today, we have the pleasure to listen to Dr. Sébastien Charnot. Dr. Charnot is a professor of the Institute of Physics of the Globe and the University of Paris in France. He works on the physics of planetary bodies, planetary disks, protoplanetary and circuplanetary disks or rings. He tries to make multidisciplinary links between theory and observations, dynamics and chemistry, with special emphasis on the genetic link between the rings and the satellite systems of the giant planets. He's also involved in several space missions, as the old Cassini mission, but the new ones, the Cheops, and the Hera mission from ESA, and the MMX from JAXA. And today, Professor Charnot will give us a talk on moon formation and volatilization, debate question. So, Sebastian, please, the podium is yours.
Hello. So I'm very honored by your invitation, and I thank you very much to give me the opportunity to talk about the moon formation. So initially, I planned to do a talk that was maybe more oriented toward chemistry, but then after I thought that maybe it was more interesting for your group to hear something more like a general theory of moon formation and its problem. So I will orient more my talk on the problem of the moon formation. I will try to show you that the question of the origin of the moon is really an open question. We are very far from understanding the origin of the moon. And we also focus on some recent work done with some of my colleagues. So you see, do you see my mouse? Do you see my mouse?
Yes, we see.
Yeah. So with all those colleagues, most of them are...
Actually, I'm not seeing. No, I'm not seeing your mouse. Sorry.
And if I do that...
and
if I do that...
No.
You don't see like a little red spot, no?
No, sorry.
Okay, so I don't understand how it works, but the thing is that it's okay, but I don't know how it works. Okay, never mind. How do I go back to the full screen mode? Okay, well, you see on the list of my co-authors here, so okay.
Okay.
So let's talk about the origin of the moon. So so it's first interesting to put some numbers. I know that some of you are specialists of giant planets, and I would like just to put numbers to make the system very clear. So the moon is a rather big object compared to the Earth. It's about 1% of an Earth mass. Okay, so the moon system, it's the mass ratio is quite low. It's 1%. If you compare, for example, for Saturn and Titan is about 10 to the minus 4 of the Saturn mass, but the moon is about 10 to the minus 2 of Titan mass. So the moon is pretty big, and it is located at about 400,000 kilometers. That is about 60 Earth radii. And as you know, of course, the moon rotation is equal to its revolution, so it rotates and orbit in about 27 days. That is more or less the definition of 1 month in our calendar. And it has a synchronized orbit like all natural satellites. Okay. And as you know, I have worked on Cassini, and I find this image very moving because it is one of the first Cassini image, and this is not an assembling. This is only one single Cassini image. So when Cassini went back to Earth, because he did several gravitational rebounds in the solar system before going to Saturn, It first went to Venus, then came back to Earth before going to the outer solar system. And Cassini took this family picture of the Earth-Moon system. So something that is very important for the Earth-Moon system is that, as you know, like in giant planet system, you have tidal forces between the Earth, that is in blue here, and the Moon, that is in gray. And the orbit of the Moon is beyond the synchronous orbit. So it means that the Moon orbits, the orbital period of the Moon is lower than the rotation period of the Earth. So as a result, it means that the tidal force of the Earth onto the Moon makes the Moon go away. The orbit of the Moon expands at a rate that is given by the formula in the white rectangle that you see here. So it depends, it's an average formula, it depends on many parameters. Okay, so you have the K2 that is about the elasticity of the Earth, and you have this mysterious parameter that is called Q, that is at the denominator, that represents the dissipation inside Earth. So the more dissipative the Earth, the faster the orbital expansion of the Moon. And Q is not very well known in our solar system. It seems that terrestrial planets are very dissipative. So it means a small value of Q, whereas giant planets are much less dissipative and they have a much larger value of Q. But big message here is that as the Moon orbit expands, since you have conservation of angular momentum in the system, it means that the Earth spin decreases with time. And we know today that the Earth rotates slower than it used to do in the past. We have several geological evidence for that, okay? And we think that the Earth maybe a few billion years ago was maybe rotating in only 4 or 5 hours only. And all the angular momentum extracted from the Earth may have been transferred to the Moon. And this is something that is, I would say, measured very regularly. You have several astronomical observatories with laser ranging measurement. And during the Apollo mission and also the Russian missions in the 60s and 70s, several mirrors has been put on Moon surface. On the right side of this slide, you see the American mirror. And so we're using laser ranging. On the left side, you see the laser ranging measurement. This observatory is located in the south of France, in the French Riviera. So every week, we measure the instantaneous Earth-Moon distance using lasers, shooting very precisely at this mirror. And thanks to this instantaneous measurement of Earth-Moon distance, we know that today the Moon is going away from the Earth at a rate of about 4 centimeters per year. So, and as a result, it means that the length of the day on Earth increased by about 2 microseconds per year because of the extraction of angular momentum into the Moon. So if you want to understand the origin of the Moon, then it is very natural to think that maybe in the past, the Moon was much closer to Earth. And if you integrate backward the equation of motion for, let's say, 4 billion years, more or less, what you find is that the Moon may have been as close as 3 Earth radii. I remind you that today Earth-Moon distance is 60 Earth radii. The Moon may have been as close as 3 Earth radii about 4.5 billion years ago. Okay, and if you assume conservation of angular momentum, this would mean that at this time the Earth was only rotating in 4 hours only compared to 24 hours today. So it is very possible that the context of the Moon formation is that it formed much closer to the Earth. And it's interesting to form the Moon at 3 Earth radii because for those who are familiar with a giant planet on rings, it corresponds more or less to the Roche limit of the Earth, okay? To the region where you may naturally form satellite out of a ring. So now let's investigate in more detail the moon, because thanks to the, we have many information about the moon that came mainly from the Apollo mission during the 60s and 70s. First, as you may know, we have the American mission have put seismometers on the moon surface. And thanks to the seismometers on the moon surface, we know a little bit about the internal structure of the moon. We know that the moon has a very small core, okay? And there is a very small iron core that is only about 400 kilometers. And we know also the average density of the moon. The average density of the moon is about 3 grams per cubic centimeter, which is very small because, as you know, the Earth is about 500 grams per cubic centimeter. So it means that relatively to Earth, the moon is extremely strongly depleted in iron. Okay. And this is something that must be explained. Another piece of information comes from the return to Earth of moon samples. There was about 40 missions in total. You know, it was an epoch where space exploration was much richer than today. And so about 40 space missions landed on the moon, and some of them have brought back to Earth moon samples. And on Earth, we have about 400 kilograms of lunar sample brought back space missions. And here you see some moon rocks in some museums on Earth. Okay, so what have we learned with those moon rocks? In fact, we have learned a lot of things, so I will not go in all details. I will just pick, I would say, 2 important results that are very critical to understand the formation of the moon. First, most of the rocks that we have brought back to Earth are made of plagioclase feldspar, and they are called anorthosite. Okay, so for astronomers like me, anorthosite is just a piece of rock. But when you discuss with people specialized in volcanoes, in geoscience, and in magmatic process on Earth, anorthosite is a very peculiar mineral. In fact, anorthosite is known to form naturally in a lava lake in magma oceans, and anorthosite has a tendency to float at the surface of lava lakes and magma oceans. So most of the minerals that have been brought back to Earth are of this type of mineral. So most people think that, in fact, the early moon was covered by a global magma ocean, and that has been covered very rapidly by a kind of lid, by a kind of cover made of those anorthosite minerals. And the dating of those anorthosite minerals shows that it has formed typically about 100 million years after the origin of the solar system. It's called the CAIs. Okay, so it means that the magma ocean on the moon surface has been covered by this lid very rapidly. So it's interesting because, but the study, the precise study of those minerals shows that the full magma ocean on the moon may have cooled down in about 100 million years, but the formation of a stagnant lid at its surface, of like a solid crust at the surface of a hot magma ocean, may have taken as short as only 1,000 years. Okay, so this is one of the big messages of those anorthositic minerals that has been brought back to Earth. Now, if we go in the elementary analysis of the moon material, it's very interesting because the moon material is very similar to Earth's mantle material. If you compare the relative abundance of elements, it really looks like Earth's mantle, but with some important differences. So in this paper by Taylor and Vizorek, you see abundance of some elements, And they are ordered by order of volatility. Here it is very refractory elements. So here it is elements that vaporize at very high temperature, and here it is very volatile element. It is elements that vaporize at low temperature, less than 800 Kelvin, for example. And so it's interesting to see that if you compare the moon to Earth, so it is not bulk Earth, it is Earth's mantle abundance. It's called BSE, bulk silicate Earth. You see that refractory elements are, the abundance of refractory elements is exactly the same as in Earth's mantle, but volatile elements, those that degas at low temperature, are strongly depleted compared to the Earth's mantle. Potassium, rubidium, cesium, and here you see zinc, for example, cadmium, and it is okay. So it looks like the moon material really looks like a piece of Earth's mantle, but you have put in a big oven where you have kept everything that is refractory and where you have strongly removed everything that is volatile. So all that seems to say that the moon material is very similar to Earth's material, but with a kind of heating process that have been active. And now if you go to the isotopic elements, what you see is that for the very refractory elements like magnesium, strontium, calcium, isotopic, there is almost no isotopic difference with the Earth, okay? But if you go to a volatile element like zinc vaporizes at 700 K, potassium vaporizes at 1000 K, copper vaporizes at 1000 K, what you see is that all those elements are enriched in their heavy isotopes. So for a chemist, this has a meaning. If an element is enriched in its heavy isotopes, it means that there was at some moment vaporization, because when you vaporize an element, the lighter isotopes tends to go away first, and what you keep on the moon would be only the heavier isotopes. And those measurements show that the moon, at least for those three elements, is enriched in the heavier isotopes of those elements. So all that suggests that there was a kind of evaporative process active on the young moon. Okay. I will not go much in the detail here. Okay. But there is a big mystery here. Okay, so you may think, okay, there is no problem. And there is another piece of evidence that shows that really the moon is in fact super close to the Earth. I will show you that. So the idea is the following. One of the most important isotopic markers in the study of solar system body is the oxygen isotope. Why is it important? As you know, you have three oxygen isotopes, oxygen 16, 17, and 18. And the most abundant being the oxygen 16. So there is something very peculiar in our solar system that nobody really understands, but that has been observed for decades, is that if you take any piece of material in the solar system, carbonaceous chondrites, meteorites, CAIs, the Earth, the Moon, Mars, here you have Mars that is over there, even the Sun here, there is no two objects in the solar system with the same signature in oxygen 17 compared to oxygen 18. It means that all objects of the solar system has different abundance of oxygen 16, and this is 17 to 16, and this is 18 to 16. Up to the point where when you find a meteorite, when you take a piece of anything in the solar system, this is considered a kind of an identity card of an object, okay? With only the oxygen isotopic abundance, you can almost identify where is the origin of a piece of material that you find. So, and the origin of that, we do not know very well. The transport of oxygen of the solar system is a very debated question. We do not know why there is no two objects in the solar system with the same isotopic signature in oxygen. Something that we think has happened in our very young solar system, which is not the subject of the presentation today. So this rule is true for all objects of the solar system, but there is only one exception. It is for the Earth and the Moon. The Earth and the Moon are on the same lines here. It's called the TFL, okay? This means, as far as we know, that it is not that the Earth and Moon oxygen isotopic compositions in oxygen isotopic composition are completely indistinguishable. And this is the only exception we know in the solar system. So it is very tempting when you put all those elements together to say that maybe the Moon is a body that is in fact mostly made of Earth mantle material with the same oxygen isotopic composition as the Earth, but that has been heated by some process. So my question is, so how is it possible? So, you know, this idea has put forward the idea that maybe the Moon was formed in a giant collision after the Earth formation. And so in the rest of my presentation, I will try to show you the advantage, but also all the many problems of this hypothesis. And I will put that in the context of formation of the solar system. Is it possible that the Moon is simply made of Earth material? In fact, it's not so easy. So to go briefly to the question of the origin of the solar system. So today there is a kind of paradigm to form a planet. There are many problems in the planet formation scenario. There is a kind of advent on the big steps of planet formation. So the idea is first there is the collapse of a molecular cloud. Then a protostar form, and the protostar then is surrounded by a kind of circumstellar disk, and this disk is called the protoplanetary disk. So initially, this protoplanetary disk is a mixture of gas and grain. It is helium and hydrogen plus interstellar grains. And then very rapidly, maybe in less than 100,000 years, the grain will suffer sedimentation because of gas drag of the grain in the gas. And then after, the grain will sedimentate in the protoplanetary disk middle plane. Then planetesimal will form. The way by which planetesimal will form is not completely clear. And in less than 1 million years, the idea is that you may form planetary embryos. Okay? And then those embryos, they migrate, they collide, and they form bigger and bigger embryos. And then the gas disk goes away in less than 5 million years. We think it is photoevaporation, okay? And at the end, you get, so in a few million years, the idea is that you have a collection of embryo from a few tens to about 100 embryo in the solar system. And they go on their growth by doing impacts and giant collisions. So in this graph, you see a simulation of growth of embryos, of growth of planets from embryo. So in this paper, Sean Raymond has distributed about 100 small embryos from a moon mass to a Mars mass in the early solar system. This is a semi-major axis. This is eccentricity. Jupiter is not visible, but Jupiter is present at 5.2 astronomical units. The color represents the chemical composition, so it's a proxy for water mass fraction, whatever. And you see that starting from embryo on the circular orbit in about 100,000 years, all embryos that are close to Jupiter are put on eccentric orbits. In 1 million years, that all the system heads up, all eccentricity are excited. So it's a mix of perturbation by Jupiter and also self-steering by the gravitational encounters between embryos. And you see that as time increases, then the number of embryos decreases, but of course, the mass of embryo increases. and in about 200 million years in this simulation, you see that you end up with only a few planets, okay, which are more or less comparable in size and mass to the 4 terrestrial planets of the solar system. So during this phase that lasts from 100 to 200 million years, it is very natural. All models predict that you have giant planet collisions, giant collisions between protoplanets. And it's interesting because moon rock detection shows that the moon may have formed between, let's say, 30 million years and 150 million years after the origin of the sun. So it is a time scale that are fully compatible with the time scales that we see in this graph. So there is a general agreement that it is very possible that the proto-Earth suffered an impact, a giant impact, after which maybe the moon has formed. So there was many works during the year 2000 about the origin of the moon. And the most successful model that produced more or less the moon mass and moon angular momentum, it is called the canonical model. And I would say the reference paper is a paper by Robin Canup, 2004, okay, that have shown that you may form the Earth moon in the context of a proto-Earth that is impacted by an object with the size of Mars, so about 10% of an Earth's mass, and at an impact velocity at about the escape velocity of Earth, about 12 kilometers per second. So in this simulation, you will see hydrodynamical simulation of the Earth-Moon giant impact. Okay, so what you see is that the proto-Earth, the color represents the temperature. The proto-Earth is completely molten by the giant impact. And what is interesting to see is that you form a debris disk around the proto-Earth. And this is not the moon. This kind of big clump is not the moon. This big clump collapse goes back to the Earth. You form a debris disk. And the argument of Robin Canup to say that it is a good context to form the moon is that if you compute the angular momentum and the mass of the disk, well, it is about the mass and angular momentum of the moon. So there is a big assumption, there is I would say, a reasonable assumption in this model is that the Earth-Moon system the Earth-Moon system has conserved its angular momentum since its origin. And it is why this simulation is considered to be a very good simulation because it has the right angular momentum. But so now, if we go to the same slide, also you have to consider that it is a very hot event. You see another view. The temperature scale is on the right scale. You see that the metal is heated up to about super high temperature, 5000 K, 8000 K, the temperature at which rocks are vaporized, okay, unless they are at very high pressure. So it's a very hot event, and it's considered as a good point to devolatilize the metal in the moon. Okay. And here you see the post-impact Earth. So Earth is quite molten. And also, important thing is that the core of the impactor is incorporated in Earth core. Okay, and then you get this debris disk around the proto-Earth. But if you look at those simulations precisely, you may wonder, but where is the moon? Because in fact, nowhere in the simulation I have shown to you, you see the moon, you see the Earth, you see the debris disk, you see the Earth, you see the debris disk, but nowhere you see the moon. In fact, those simulations are giant impact collision, giant impact simulation. It is there is no radiative transfer, so there's no cooling process in the simulation. So the system is considered to be like fully adiabatic, so it's conservation of entropy. Okay. So the simulations are adapted for very fast, very short. Want to study the long-term evolution system of several contexts.
Sebastian, we cannot listen to you. Sebastian? Parou, né? Yeah, I think we got he lost the connection. I think we lost him. Let's just wait for a few minutes, please. Your mic is off. Your microphone is off.
Do you hear me?
Yeah. Now we're here. Yeah.
So yeah, it seems that was a problem. So I go on. How do I do that? Because this thing I never know. Show now. Do you see my PowerPoint or not?
I think you have to start again sharing the screen.
There was an error in screen sharing. Let's do that like that. Use my PowerPoint.
We're still not seeing your screen. It's not been shared yet.
Well, because I do.
Okay, now it's coming. I think it's just your internet is a little bit slower. So now we see your screen. Yeah, we see your presentation, but it's not full screen.
Is it better now?
Yes, now it's full screen. Yeah. I think
so
you could restart from this slide. It's okay. There are some suggestions. No problem. That happens. There are some suggestions. You talk a little bit slower, if possible. Okay, good. Thank you.
I can go slower. No problem.
Thank you.
So I was saying that in the simulation, you never see the moon formation. You see the giant impacts, but never the moon formation, simply because those hydrodynamical simulations are called SPH, smooth particle hydrodynamics, and they do not consider radiative effects. On short time scale, radiative effects are not important because you can consider the system as adiabatic. But on long time scale, this is a wrong approximation because you have cooling process. At very high temperature, you have a lot of radiative cooling, and radiative cooling is not considered in the evolution of the system. As a result, the gas is always too hot, and you never see moon formation in the simulation. If you want really to go to the formation of the moon, you have to study this debris disk that is formed after the moon giant impact. And this debris disk that is called the proto-lunar disk is a very mysterious disk because its physics is very exotic. So the current picture today is the following. You have a giant impact on the proto-Earth, and then the Earth is completely molten, but you form a kind of a big, super hot and super thick disk around the proto-Earth. That is the proto-lunar disk. This proto-lunar disk is made of vaporized rocks, and its temperature is about 2000 to 3000 Kelvin. We do not know really. The pressure midplane of this disk is so high that the material is liquid. You have a central liquid layer made of hot magma. You have a magma disk in the midplane of the disk. Then above the magma disk, you have an atmosphere of silicate vapor. So this kind of disk is, the physics of this disk is not very well understood. But the big idea is that it is very possible that this disk becomes gravitationally unstable at the Roche limit. So I remind you that the Roche limit, it is about 3 Earth radii. And then the material may assemble into a moon. So in the year 2000 and 2001, there was some simulation of this disk, but with thermodynamics.
Sebastian?
Yeah.
Just one suggestion. Perhaps if you turn off your camera, the transmission gets better.
Ah, yeah, that's a good idea. Where?
At the bottom.
Google Meet. Is it better? My camera.
Yeah, well, you keep the presentation as it was. It just that's the camera that shows you.
Okay, like that.
Yeah, well, your camera is closed now, but we are not seeing your full screen yet.
Ah, okay. I go. Alors, show, authorize. Do you see my full screen now?
It's coming. It's coming. Yeah, we see your, well, it says you're showing a presentation, but we do not see your screen. No.
I'm seeing the screen. I can see the presentation.
And now, do you see it or not?
I can see the presentation.
Você consegue ver a apresentação dele?
Eu consigo.
Well.
Tem mais alguém vendo?
Just a minute, Sebastian. For me, it's not showing, but for Luana, it's showing. So perhaps the problem is with me.
No, for me, it's the same. I can see the screen as well.
So I think try again, Sebastian. Please remove it and put again, please. Sebastian, can you listen to me? Okay, I see you again. I can see your presentation. Your mic is off. Your microphone is off.
Is it better now?
Yes, yes. Everything is fine now. You can follow. It's okay. Good. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry for the problem. Okay. So in those simulation made by the Japanese team, you see N-body simulation of protolunar disk. So on the left side, it is seen from the edge. On the right side, it is seen from above. And the Earth is in white in the middle. And you see the protolunar disk. And you may notice the spiral arms that form. It means that the protolunar disk is gravitationally unstable. And if you look at panel D, A, B, C, D, seen from above, you see that clumps of material form at about, it's here in this simulation, it's about 3 Earth radii, just above the dashed line circle, and the dashed line circle shows the Roche limit. And so we think, on the basis of those simulations, that the proto-moon may form at about the Roche limit of the Earth. Here you see a much higher resolution simulation, and you see the same thing, spiral arms that shows that it's gravitationally unstable, and you see clump forming typically at about 3 Earth radii. So this situation is very remindful of a system that you know well. It is the Saturnian system, where at about the Roche limit, this is about the location of the F-ring, you see small satellites that may have formed, we do not really know, but that are maybe supposed to form quite recently. And inside the Roche limit, accretion is not possible. You have rather a disk, and beyond the Roche limit, all materials are accreted into satellites. So in the paper by Kokubo et al. 2000, where they simulate the formation of the moon from the protolunar disk, they find a very interesting result, is that they find that from the disk, the moon forms in a very, very short time scale. It's about 100 orbits if you look at the increase of mass on the right panel. And so 100 orbits represent at 3 Earth radii, it's about 3 weeks. So they conclude that the moon formed in 3 weeks after the giant impact. Is it really that the moon formed in 3 weeks? So it's not as simple, in fact. The moon do not really form in 3 weeks after the giant impact. You have to understand here that there is no thermodynamics in the simulation. The system, in fact, is completely cold in the sense that there is no internal energy. So in the real life, so in those simulations where there is no internal energy, in real life, in fact, you have to wait for the internal energy of the system, that is simply the head to go away before the disk can collapse in a thin disk and form the moon. So I would say is that in reality, you have to wait a cooling time scale, and it's not very clear how long is the cooling time scale, about, we think 100 to 1000 years, plus 3 weeks. Okay. So now, in fact, so the way we see the birth environment is the moon is this very complex protolunar disk. And so the way energy is extracted is not simple, because you have this liquid magma disk layer that radiates away its energy, but it's very possible that the atmosphere is thick, okay? So it's a complex radiative transfer problem to know in how long this disk cool down. And depending on the work, it may take 100 to 1000 years. Okay, I will not much go in the detail of this work, but now, okay, let's go to problems. I told you that we have good reasons to think that the moon material is very similar to the Earth material. But there was a big problem that was reported by Robin Canup herself. If she looked like what is the origin of the material that goes into the protolunar disk. And she discovered something very interesting. If you look like the right column in red here, is that in fact, most of the material that goes into the disk does not come from the Earth, but comes from the impactor. You see 80% up to 90% goes from the impactor. And this has been found by many different authors that in fact in the canonical impact, most of the disk metal come from the impactor. There is just one very recent paper by Rossonneau et al. That has changed the equation of state, taking a liquid Earth rather than a solid Earth, where they find that maybe the result could be different. But for the moment, it is not firmly established. Well, if you have the disk that is made mostly of impactor material, then you are in big trouble, because as I told you, the oxygen isotopic composition of the moon is exactly the same as Earth. And today, we do not understand, as far as we understand oxygen isotopic composition in the solar system, all objects of the solar system are different. So we would expect that the impactor has a different. We would expect that the impactor has a different oxygen isotopic composition than the Earth, and so we should. So if the disk was made of impactor material, it should have the oxygen signature of the impactor, not the oxygen signature of the Earth. And for the moment, this is a big problem. We do not really understand how is it possible. So some people have proposed like explanation for that, but it's not really easy to test. There is this paper by Palevan and Stevenson, 2007, that suggests that if the moon formation took a long time before it formed in the proto-lunar disk, then you may have time to homogenize the disk before the moon appears. So the idea is that you have to mix the disk very efficiently before the moon form, so that the disk signature and the Earth oxygen signature becomes completely undistinguishable because of chemical equilibration. So it may be a possibility. The only thing is that we have no idea of the turbulence of this disk because this disk is very poorly known. So to try to solve this problem, so there was another class of models that has been developed in about 2012 by people around Sarah Stewart and Matthias Schuck. And so they have suggested something completely different. They say, okay, one of the big assumptions of the CANUP model, the canonical scenario, is that the angular momentum of the young moon, the angular momentum of the Earth-Moon system was constant along the history of the solar system. In Schuck and Stewart 2012, they do a different assumption. They say, let's imagine that the Earth-Moon system had much more angular momentum than today when it formed. And so they have built this model called fast spinning Earth. So in the model of fast spinning Earth, the idea is that the Earth was rotating in about only 1 hour. Okay. So the Earth was almost close to centrifugal destruction. And let's imagine it has been hit. It was rotating in 2 hours. And let's imagine it has been hit by a very fast small impactors at about 20 kilometers per second. In that case, what they show is that the Earth is spun up by the impact, and the Earth is centrifugally destroyed. And most of the material that goes in the proto-lunar disk, in that case, is not impactor, but is in fact Earth mantle. So this paper is really interesting because they show that, in fact, most of the disk material is dominated by Earth, and most of is dominated by Earth material. So it's a very nice model. The only problem is that the angular momentum is much higher than today. So now the question is, how how to explain the 2D angular momentum of the Earth. So they develop a complex tidal theory, including Earth, Moon, and the Sun. And what they show is that as the Moon goes away because of Earth tide, it may, as the Moon goes away, it may become resonant with the Sun. It means that the time, the precession time of the Moon becomes commensurable with the rotation period of the Earth. Okay, so you have a resonance between the Moon and the Sun, and in that case, a lot of angular momentum is extracted from the Moon and put into the Sun. So it is called an evection resonance. So because of this evection resonance, it depends on the model. The Earth-Moon system loses angular momentum, and this angular momentum is transferred to the Sun, and then you end up with a 2D angular momentum of the Earth. The problem with that is that those tidal evolution models are not very well constrained, and they rely on a lot of free parameters, okay? So I would say that the question is still open if this kind of evection resonance model is still valid. I will jump that. So in the fast spinning Earth, you have to see that it's a super hot event. It is much hotter than the canonical model of the Earth. And in that case, what is shown by Locke and Stewart is that the Earth is completely molten, and you create a kind of big donut around the Earth that corresponds to the proto-lunar disk, and they have called it the synestia. And it's become like a big hot mineral vapor atmosphere disk, where progressively the minerals sedimentate in the midplane and form the Moon. And the origin and the formation of that is still, formation of the Moon, the synestia, is still under investigation. Well, now I would like to come back to the question of devolatilization in the last minutes that I have, okay? You may think, oh, okay, so all that is super hot with temperature of a few thousand kelvins, so there is no problem to devolatilize material. Well, in fact, it is very hard to devolatilize the Earth-Moon system. So Nakajima and Stevenson in 2014 have shown that, in fact, you cannot make any material escape from the Earth-Moon system because of the strong gravitational field of the Earth. Even if the disk is super hot, it is well inside the gravitational potential of Earth, and so all material cannot easily escape first. And there is also another problem, is that the system is very poor in hydrogen, okay? And the system is dominated by heavy atoms, oxygen, silicium, carbon, oxygen, magnesium, silicium. And those atomic species are so heavy that they do not leave the Earth-Moon system. So a lot of people have investigated the idea that maybe the liquid magma disk may form a molten moon, okay? And here is a list of authors that investigated the idea. And the idea is that if you want to devolatilize the moon, you have to put liquid magma into the molten moon, but at the same time, you have to prevent the vapor to go into the moon, because the liquid magma contains the refractory element and the vapor contains the light element. So you have to find a way, if you want to explain the moon composition, to put all heavy elements into the moon while preventing the vapor to go into the moon. And in fact, this is not easy at all. So there was several hypotheses that has been explored. So in a paper by Robin Canup, it was proposed that there was a tidal torque between the moon and the disk that prevents the vapor to go into the moon. In a paper that myself I have written, we have proposed that a difference of viscosities between the liquid and the magma may prevent the vapor to go into the moon. And in Locke and Stewart, they have another process invoking drag of droplets. Okay, all those very complex models have a big problem, is that we do not really know the physics of the proto-lunar disk that is very complex. And I will just finish by that. In a recent paper, we have proposed a much simpler solution and that has direct application to exoplanets. We have just proposed that the early moon was just a fully molten moon with a big magma ocean. And what we have shown is very simple, is that if some material can escape the moon, here you see the Earth in blue and the moon in gray, if material can escape the moon, so we agree with Nakajima and Stevenson that the material cannot escape the Earth-Moon system, but what we found is that if material leaves the moon, it can never go back to the moon. It's trapped in orbit around the Earth, it cannot go back to the moon. So it's a three-body problem. In fact, if material leaves the moon, it must go through the Lagrange point of the moon, but it's very difficult to go back through the Lagrange point because of energy conservation. If you have any dissipative process, cooling, friction, or anything that dissipates energy, you can never go back through the Lagrange point, go back to the moon. So the first idea is that if material leaves the moon surface, it's trapped in orbit around the Earth, but it's lost from the moon. I will jump that because I'm already late. Okay. And what we have studied now is the idea of hydrodynamical escape. So let's imagine the following. So you have the molten surface of the moon that is liquid, and you have a vapor atmosphere. And what we have computed, it is the structure of the vapor atmosphere. So this vapor atmosphere is heated at about 2000 Kelvin at its base. And what we have found is that the vapor goes efficiently away from the moon. And the key mechanism to make the vapor goes away. So here you see the hydrodynamic equation, flux conservation and momentum conservation. The key mechanism, it is the Earth tides. In fact, when the moon forms at 3 Earth radii, the Earth tides are very intense, and it really promotes acceleration of the atmosphere above the magma ocean. And here is what we found. Here you see the velocity, and here you see the distance to the moon surface in units of moon distance, moon radius. In green here, you see the Hill radius of the moon. It is the radius beyond which the material is lost from the moon. And what we found is that the vapor atmosphere is very efficiently accelerated above the moon liquid surface, and it is lost from the moon very rapidly at temperature above 1600 Kelvin. So it's called a transonic solution. It's very similar to Parker winds, and we find that the pressure at the surface of the moon is very low, about 1 Pascal typically. So I will jump that. And also what we found is quite interesting is that you see on this graph the flux of escaping material from the proto-moon for different temperatures. So the temperature is in color as a function of the Earth-Moon distance. And what you see in this graph, it is as the moon goes away from the Earth, the further the moon from the Earth, the smaller is the flux. This means that when the moon is very close to the Earth's gravitational field efficiently attracts the vapor, but when it goes away from the Earth, the flux shuts down. And to explain I will jump that also because I'm super late. To explain the abundance of potassium and sodium, we have to say that the flux shut down in less than 1000 years. So we have computed the solidification time as a function of surface temperature. And the solidification time we find is a few hundred to about 1000 years. And this is compatible with the formation of anorthositic mineral that is found on the Earth's surface. Okay, so I have finished this presentation. So you see that the problem of moon formation is far from being solved. Okay, the proto-lunar disk, which may be the birthplace of the moon, is very poorly understood, and where you have a lot of physics to couple. And we think that a good way to better understand the moon formation is the study of its volatile content. How did the moon lose its volatile material? And I think there is a lot of other things to discover. And also the proto-moon may have been covered by a magma ocean. and it is very mindful of recent exoplanets. So I think it's a very nice subject of investigation with a lot of space missions that are now programmed to go to the moon surface. And I thank you very much, and please excuse me for my connection problems.
Oh, Sebastian, thanks very much. It was a lecture on Moon's problem. Very good, very good, very nice. So now we are open for questions. Anybody has a question? Would you like to make a question? Okay, Gustavo, you may open your mic.
Hi, Professor.
Hello, Gustavo.
Hello. Does the formation of the moon in a debris disk will form a Hubble pipe type moon, a porous moon?
It's not clear because it's very possible that the material was completely molten. You see, it's not solid because the temperature is very high. Okay.
Okay.
So people think that it's very possible that it's not Hubble pile because everything is liquid. It's more like a liquid self-gravitating moon. It is the way we see it.
Okay.
Okay, thanks, Gustavo.
Thank you, Professor.
Any other question? Anybody? Well, I have a point just to discuss the model by Canup. The first model, the velocity of collision should be very low. So that seems to be a kind of problem to me in terms of how to get to find a situation to produce so low impact velocity. It's
you mean about the escape velocity of the Earth?
The impact, yeah, this 12 kilometers per second. The impactor.
Yeah, it's true that you cannot do less in a simulation of assembling on the Earth. Impact velocity can go up to 20 or 25 kilometers per second, if I remember well.
Yes.
Yeah, and so it's true that it's quite low impact velocity, but the problem is that they are constrained by the angular momentum. You see the idea? This is the big idea of the Canup model, is that the big constraint is the angular momentum of the process of the problem. Sorry, of the system. So you do not have a lot of margin, but there is also they can play also on the angle of impacts. Okay, you can play between the angle of impacts. So I think you have other solution with the impact velocity that are larger, but in general, it's less than 2 times the escape velocity of the Earth.
I see. So yeah. What do you think? The Shook model is more reasonable?
Well, the Shook model is very nice because they have a simple way to explain why it is Earth material that is in the moon. The only problem is that they rely on this evection resonance, which physical model is very. There are a lot of free parameters. So I would say that I'm not sure. Okay, isotopic composition of the moon seems to show that the temperature was about 2000 kelvins. And it is true that in the Shook and Stewart model of a fast spinning Earth, temperatures are much higher. So I would say that on the basis of isotopic composition of some elements, you may favor the Shook model, the Canup model. The only problem is that in the Canup model, you put impactor material. The moon would be made of impactor material. So there are pros and cons, and for the moment, I think that nobody can say who is right and who is wrong. Yeah.
I see. Well, I have another point. Perhaps it's silly, but You said at the beginning the large difference in the density of the overall density of the moon in comparison to the Earth. And
Yeah.
but is that easily explained? I mean, for this
Yeah.
magma.
Now, you are right, and sorry, I did not came back to the point. In all models, the large difference between the Earth density and the Moon density is very well explained. It is that the content of iron of the Moon is very low. You have much less iron in the Moon than in the Earth, and it is easily explained by all the model. The idea is that the iron core of the impactor is incorporated into Earth's core in all models. Okay, so the Moon is made of only mantle material, that is basaltic material, and in all models, what you see is that the two iron cores, they fusion into one thing into the Earth's core.
I see. Okay. So that's not a problem. Okay, we have a question here by Gio. Do you want to ask, or can I read it?
Well, do as you want, Otton. Thank you.
Okay.
Well, if I am here, okay, I can ask. I see. Hello, Sebastian. How are you doing? Thank you for your wonderful presentation.
Thank you very much. I'm very
good. I'm intrigued because of so many problems to accommodate the model with the facts. You explained it very well, the facts about the moon. Before we had this hypothesis of the moon formation from this collision, we had other hypotheses about this formation. Do you think these problems to accommodate the model with the facts may put in risk this most accepted model today? Or is just a question of accommodating better the model?
I don't know. Yeah, it's possible that maybe we have to fully revise the moon formation. There is no proof that the moon was formed in one single impact. Okay. For example, there was a paper a few years ago by the team of Aronson in Israel that suggests that the moon assembled from many small impacts. So it's an interesting idea because it may solve the problem of oxygen isotopic composition. Because if you make the moon by many small impacts on Earth, you have a kind of homogenization before you assemble the moon. So it's maybe a good idea, but always you have an angular momentum process problem. And so I would say that this model for the moment needs further investigation. You have also the historical model of the son of Darwin. Where is that? Where is the son of Darwin? I have it here. Okay. George Darwin was the son of Darwin. Okay. He used to live by the end of the 19th century, and his idea was that the moon was that the Earth was rotating super fast when the Earth formed, and its idea was that the moon metal was extracted from Earth's mantle, and it created the Pacific Ocean. This is what it was saying in the 19th century, because at this time we did not discover the plate tectonics. But this idea is not stupid, and in fact, the idea of George Darwin is very similar to Chuk and Stewart. Because what say to Chuk and Stewart? They say that the Earth is spinning super fast, and you have an impact with a very fast impactor that spin up the Earth even more. And then, because of centrifugal force, you put all material in orbit. So the idea of Chuk and Stewart, in fact, is a kind of modern version, I would say. It's of the George Darwin idea. Okay. So to conclude, I would say that we have to be very open-minded. There are so many constraints on the moon formation that are not reproduced by model that maybe at some moment we will find another solution. But there is, yeah, but the idea is that it's clear that it was a hot event. There is no doubt about that. But is it true that the angular momentum was conserved in the Earth-Moon evolution? This is a very important question, and for the moment, I would say the answer is very unclear. Something that would be important would be to see if oxygen isotopic composition, which is a big constraint, is really, why is it so varying in the solar system? Would it be possible that the Earth was hit by an impactor with the same isotopic composition as the Earth? Why not? And we don't know if it is possible, but it would solve a lot of things. Yeah.
Fascinating, thank you. Such a fundamental problem, and still so many issues left to solve. Fascinating, thank you.
Very nice problem. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Gilles. Anybody else? Any more comment or question? Okay. So I'd like to thank you again, Cherno. It was a great talk. So thanks very much. And,
thank you very much.
I think that's it. We can finish now. I'd like to thank everybody for their participation, and our seminar will be in